Hi Year 4 and welcome to another week of social studies, and in this lesson we're going to explore how the discovery of oil impacted on the UAE and its growth. In last week's lesson we looked at the UAE before the discovery of oil, and hopefully you identified it to be a very different place to what it's like now. After the discovery of oil, let's see how that changed the development of the UAE. So let's explore our learning objective for today, and it's to explore how the discovery of oil changed the development of the United Arab Emirates. Some key vocabulary to get us familiar with the text for today. We've got, first of all, crude oil. Crude oil is naturally occurring liquid. It's found in the ground or out at sea. Okay, and when it's refined, which means when it's changed and cleaned up in a way, it can then be used for oil that we might know for gasoline or petrol, for example. When we refer to it as crude oil, that's literally in the state it comes out the ground. His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, hopefully I don't need to explain who he was, but just in case I do, he was the first president of the UAE, and he was the historical ruler of Abu Dhabi. Pipeline. A pipeline is a connection of pipes which will take oil from one place to another. In this example, it's a line of connected pipes with pumps and control devices, and it can carry the liquid or gas over a long distance. An oil tanker could be a vehicle on land, like a lorry, or a ship out at sea, and it transports the oil from the refineries also through to the pumps. An oil well or an oil platform is a hole in the ground or out at sea, and it's designed to bring up the oil from below the surface up and out for us to collect. A port is a town or a city with a harbour where ships can load and unload cargo. For example, Jebel Ali Port. And last but not least, profit. Profit is termed as a financial term, and it's the money that a company makes. When you're looking at profits, it's the amount of services that they need with the amount that they then sell, and then the difference between the two is the profit, the money that they make from, in this case, selling the oil. So what's oil used for? Have a think for a moment of how many different uses of oil you can identify. And you're going to come back to this for your task later on. Let's look at these statistics. So uses of oil, we've got a huge use of oil there for road transportation. Well over half, 57% of oil across the whole world this is used for road transportation. You've also got things like air transport, making up just under 20%, sitting there at 18%. Industry would be the use of factories and services, but then 8% of oil is actually used in other places as well. And you're going to investigate this a little bit later on today. So those are some of the uses of oil, and you can see how important it is on society today. Let's think about when oil was first discovered in the UAE. Oil was discovered in the sea close to Abu Dhabi in 1958. Shortly after that, life in the Trucial states began to change. Remember from last week, we referred to the Trucial states as the name that the individual emirates were given before it became the United Arab Emirates. In 1963, the first oil tanker carrying crude oil departed from Abu Dhabi. In 1966, His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan became ruler of Abu Dhabi. At the moment, all of this has taken place before the union of the UAE. Oil revenues were used to develop the Emirate of Abu Dhabi and improve the lives of people in the Emirates. On the 2nd of December 1971, the UAE was formed, with Sheikh Zayed named as the first president. The same year, the first oil company was formed, and we know that company today as ADNOC, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. And you can see their petrol stations all over Abu Dhabi, and some are in Dubai as well. After the union of the 7 Emirates, oil revenues were used across the whole country, so not just in Abu Dhabi, but each of the Emirates benefited from the sale of oil. And life began to change faster than the UAE after the UAE was formed. Families began to move to cities to be closer to new job opportunities. Oil revenues were used to build roads, houses, schools, hospitals, and markets. So you can imagine that from the sale of the oil and the profits that the company were making, when they were reinvested, which means they were put back into the economy and put back into the country, rapid change was able to take place. Roads, schools, hospitals, and markets all benefited from the sale and the investment of oil in the UAE. Let's take a quick pit stop and reflect on what we've read so far. Have a look at the following questions and think about what the answers might be. Pause the video to respond to each question, just in your heads, and then move forward to check the answers. Let's reflect on these questions. Families move closer to cities because the first president of the UAE was, there are some Emirates in the UAE, the first oil tanker departed Abu Dhabi in, and profits from the sale of oil helped to open what? Let's review the questions. Families moved closer to cities because they wanted more job opportunities. The first president of the UAE was Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. There are 7 Emirates in the UAE. The first oil tanker departed Abu Dhabi in 1963. And profits from the sale of oil helped to open roads, houses, hospitals, schools, and markets.
On the 4th of July 1962, an oil tanker called British Signal sailed from Das Island carrying Abu Dhabi's first ever cargo of oil. The shipment, which was produced from ADNOC OPCO's Sheikh field, ushered Abu Dhabi into a new era. Under the sound leadership of His Highness the President Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the progress and achievements made since that time have affected not only Abu Dhabi, but also the United Arab Emirates as a whole. In the 40 years since that first shipment of oil from Abu Dhabi, the country has come a long way, and so has the oil and gas industry, advancing from pioneer days to the ADNOC OPCO we know today. In 1954, ADMA Limited was formed as a venture to operate the concession to prospect for offshore oil in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. Das Island was selected as a land base for prospecting, and skin divers explored the seabed, bringing up samples of rock for analysis. A year later, in 1955, an advance party landed on Das Island to begin construction work. The desert island had no freshwater or other resources to sustain the workforce that descended on it. All of the machinery, materials and supplies were brought in by boat. Accommodation for personnel and warehouses were constructed. An airstrip was prepared. and 500,000 tons of rock shifted to make the harbour walls. A new solution needed to be found to construct the first offshore oil platform, because the shallow waters of the Gulf did not provide enough draft for the conventional assembly at sea using heavy lift barges. It was decided to construct the giant hull of the ADMA Enterprise in Europe and tow it for 7,000 miles through the waters of the Eastern Atlantic, around the Rock of Gibraltar, past the port of Aden and into the Gulf. The platform arrived at Das Island after 3 months at sea. Once the leg extensions and deck equipment were fitted, the rig was secured in its position at sea. In 1958, the first offshore well was drilled in the Sheikh field of Abu Dhabi. And it was from this field that the first shipment of crude oil for the world market was exported on the British signal in 1962. 4 years later, His Highness the President Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan became ruler of Abu Dhabi. Under his leadership, the oil industry developed, with drilling offshore and onshore into the Sheikh and Zakum fields. The liquefied gas plant on Das Island was inaugurated in December 1973. It was one of many projects that contributed to the development of ADMA OPCO. Abu Dhabi city grew alongside its oil industry. The island settlement of 50 years ago, with its fortress palace and scattering of dwellings, became a modern city with wide streets and green spaces. The people had access to good housing, education and medical services. Improved opportunities were also provided by the oil industry as it expanded. Personnel in the field was supported by research and monitoring in ADMA OPCO's laboratories, by advances in training and development, and in occupational health and safety systems. In addition, sophisticated computer control and monitoring equipment, linked by modern communications to new plant and facilities, improved the efficiency of oil and gas extraction and processing, as well as putting high priority on preservation of the natural environment. In 1998, ADMA OPCO moved into the new company headquarters on the Corniche in Abu Dhabi. And it is from here that new initiatives for the 21st century continue to improve and grow the company.
Let's explore the task for today. You can use any appropriate app to present this information, but your outcome must be placed on Seesaw at the end. And that must be done by clicking the green Add Response button to this Seesaw activity. Don't just upload it into your journal. I want us to consider, why is crude oil or petroleum so important? I want you to make a list of products made from petroleum. Are you surprised by some of them? You can include text and you can include pictures. I want you to try and find as many different examples as you can. Think back to that graphic we had towards the beginning about how different materials are used. But there are many other uses of oil as well. How many can you find? You might do this as a pic collage. It might be a list of notes in the Notes app or a keynote presentation. It's entirely up to you how you present your findings. I'd like you to also consider, why was the discovery of oil so important for the UAE? Try to summarize the day's work in your own views and own words, and then add this to your response to this Seesaw activity. Be creative and make use of any resource you can to find the uses of oil and why it was so important.